Little girl gave her sandwich to a crying stranger unaware. He was a judge who'd soon decide her fate. The courtroom was silent. Too silent. 8-year-old Lila Vasquez sat beside her public defender, legs swinging nervously, fingers clutching the frayed edge of her jacket. Across the aisle, a woman from CPS, Mrs. Hammond, shuffled papers with precision, speaking in hushed tones to her aide. Behind Lila, her mother, Isabel, stood tall. Despite the dark circles under her eyes and the weight of weeks without her child. At the front, Judge Nathaniel Gray stared at them, his gavel untouched, his expression unreadable. And then, before I make my decision, he said slowly, I'd like to tell you all a story. The day had started with cold fingers and an empty stomach. Lila Vasquez blew into her cupped hands as she walked the cracked sidewalk toward school, her breath rising like steam in the winter morning. Her gloves were mismatched, one red, one gray, and her too-thin jacket flapped in the wind. The zipper had given out weeks ago, and her mama tried to fix it with safety pins and patience. But the pins kept falling out, and the patience was wearing thin. Still, Lila walked with a quiet determination, her backpack bouncing against her small frame with every step. She counted her steps to distract from the cold. 1, 2, 3. And looked forward to one thing. Breakfast. School meant warmth. It meant food. It meant a brief escape from the apartment that smelled of mildew and silence and fear. Cafeteria lights buzzed as she stepped in, the smell of powdered eggs and toast immediately wrapping around her like a hug. She smiled at Miss Didi, the lunch lady with the short curls and kind eyes. You made it, baby, Miss Didi said, sliding the tray toward her. You holding up okay? Lila shrugged. My mama worked late. I folded the laundry by myself. Miss Didi's mouth pressed into a line, then softened. You're strong, sugar, strong like a little lion. Lila grinned, her cheeks pink with cold and pride. She turned to take her seat when Miss Didi reached under the counter and pulled something from her lunch bin. Here, she whispered, slipping an extra sandwich, peanut butter, crustless, into a napkin and tucking it into Lila's backpack. Just in case. You hang on to this, okay? Lila's eyes lit up like fireflies. Thank you, she whispered, her voice full of wonder, like someone had just handed her the moon. Mama's gonna be so happy. She didn't know it then, but that sandwich was about to change everything. By the end of the school day, the wind had picked up. The sky hung low, heavy with the promise of snow or sorrow. Lila clutched her backpack tight, the corners of her coat pulled together in a feeble attempt to stay warm. Her shoes, thin canvas sneakers with holes in the soles, soaked up the wet from the sidewalk with every step. Still, she hummed softly to herself, the tune her mama always sang when she braided her hair. It was the sound of home, even if that home didn't have heat. As she rounded the corner near the old bus stop, she saw him, a man, tall, slouched, wrapped in a threadbare coat that looked more like a curtain than something made for weather. He was sitting on the bench like the wind had knocked him there. His hands trembled. His eyes, red-rimmed and glassy, stared into nothing. He didn't look dangerous. He looked defeated, like someone who had lost something big. Maybe everything. He wiped at his face with the back of a shaking hand. That's when Lila saw it. Tears. Not loud sobs, not dramatic wails, just quiet leaking sadness. The kind her mama cried in the bathroom when she thought Lila was asleep. Lila stopped walking. Her feet felt stuck to the sidewalk. The sandwich in her backpack felt heavier somehow, like it was pulling her back, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. She looked at the man again. He didn't notice her. Most grown-ups didn't, but Miss Didi had. And her mama always did. And if someone had noticed the man earlier, really noticed, maybe he wouldn't be sitting on a bench with nothing but his grief to keep him warm. So Lila made a choice. She turned around. Excuse me, she said, her voice small but steady. The man blinked, surprised. His voice was gravel when he spoke. "Yay. I have something," she said, pulling off her backpack. She fished out the sandwich, the one Miss Deedee gave her, still wrapped in a napkin with a little smiley face drawn on it in purple pen. He stared at it, then stared at her. "I don't have any money," he said quickly, defensively. I'm not begging." "I didn't say you were," Leela replied, tilting her head. "You just look like you need it more than me." She held it out again, for a moment. He didn't move. Just blinked at her like he was trying to remember how to function in a world where this kind of thing still happened. Then, slowly, carefully, he took the sandwich from her hands. His fingers brushed hers. They were ice. "Why?" He whispered, "Because my mama says kindness don't cost nothing, but it can buy everything." And with that, she smiled, turned, and walked away, her backpack bouncing and her steps a little lighter. Behind her, the man unwrapped the sandwich with trembling hands. He stared at the peanut butter like it was some kind of miracle, because to him, it was. He didn't eat right away. Just sat there, eyes filled with something that hadn't been there in weeks. Hope Lila didn't tell her mama about the sandwich that night. Isabel came home late, smelling like bleach and desperation. She collapsed on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and tried not to cry when she saw the eviction notice on the counter. "Baby girl?" she asked. Lila looked up from her sketchpad. "You eat today?" Lila nodded. "Miss Deedee gave me an extra sandwich." Isabel's face broke, not in sadness, but in relief. She crossed the room in 2 strides and scooped Leela into her arms, holding her like she was made of porcelain and gold. "Thank God," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "Thank God." That night, Leela lay in bed beneath a blanket of patched fleece and dreams. She didn't know the man had walked straight to a shelter after finishing that sandwich. She didn't know he'd whisper her name, Lila, to the volunteer who offered him a bed. She didn't know he would sleep indoors for the first time in 6 weeks, because her kindness reminded him he was still human. She didn't know that the man had once worn robes, that he had once held a gavel, that he had once made decisions that changed lives. And that one day, soon, he would make another, for her. But for now, she slept soundly. The wind howled outside, but inside the small apartment, love kept the dark at bay. And far across the city, in a borrowed cot in a quiet shelter, Judge Nathaniel Gray held a napkin with a smiley face drawn in purple ink, and finally, wept for the first time in months. Not from grief, but from grace. The cot creaked beneath Nathaniel Gray's weight as he sat upright, the gray dawn bleeding into the room through a cracked window. Around him, the shelter was quiet, men curled under thin blankets, the air thick with the scent of sweat, mildew, and forgotten dreams. He ran a hand through his hair, now streaked with silver. It used to be clean-cut, styled, controlled, like everything else in his life. But now it was overgrown, unkempt, a reflection of the unraveling that had come too fast and too hard. In his lap lay the napkin. It had smoothed out overnight. But the purple smiley face still stared back at him, innocent and unbothered. He couldn't stop looking at it. Couldn't stop feeling it. It was just a sandwich, but it wasn't. He brought it to his lips, kissed the corner like it was a sacred relic, then carefully folded it into his jacket pocket. He didn't know the girl's name. He hadn't asked. He hadn't thought to. At the time, his mind had still been fogged with shame, guilt, and loss, an endless echo of failure, reminding him who he had become. But now he needed to know. He stood slowly, ignoring the ache in his knees, the quiet protests from a body used to tailored suits and chauffeured rides, not sidewalks and benches. He glanced at the shelter clock, 6:12 a.m., breakfast. Wouldn't be served for another hour. He slipped out the door and into the bitter morning cold. The walk to the courthouse was longer now. He used to ride in a black car with tinted windows and a badge that got him through traffic. Now he walked with the rest of the forgotten, ignored by the city he once judged from behind a bench elevated above it all. The marble steps loomed ahead, polished and proud, like they still belonged to someone else. He didn't go in. He wasn't allowed to anymore. Instead, he crossed to the park nearby and sat on a bench overlooking the building, his breath fogging in the morning light. And finally, he let himself remember. 18 months earlier, Judge Nathaniel Gray sat in courtroom 9C, the gavel heavy in his hand. His courtroom was always cold, quiet, like a museum. Precision ruled here, respect, authority. And no mistakes. Next case, he said, not looking up. A lawyer cleared her throat. State versus Marisol Vasquez. Charge, unlawful termination of lease. Defendant claims improper notice and landlord retaliation. Nathaniel's eyes flicked up at the woman in the back. Latina, maybe late 30s, holding the hand of a tiny girl in pigtails. He blinked. Something flickered. Then he shut it down. He'd heard hundreds of stories like this. A single mother, low-income housing, accusations of discrimination, promises broken, tears shed. He'd learned to build a wall. If he didn't, the weight would crush him. The opposing counsel presented a thick file. Legal, cold, final. Nathaniel tapped his pen, flipping through forms. Then he looked again. The little girl was coloring, right there in the back row. Quiet, focused, like she'd been through this before, like she already knew how hard the world could be. He almost paused the proceedings. But he didn't. He ruled in favor of the landlord. Said the documentation was clear, that the law didn't bend for emotional appeals. Marisol Vasquez didn't cry. She just nodded, lips tight, and walked out with her daughter. Nathaniel didn't know her name back then, didn't care to. A week later, he was driving home from a dinner party when the call came. His son, Jason, drunk driving, a crash, a little boy and his mother in the other car. Gone on impact. Nathaniel's world shattered in a way no gavel could repair. Jason was arrested. The media descended. People called it karma. The judge who gave no mercy now begged for leniency. The irony was suffocating. He quit, sold the house, donated the money to the victim's family. Vanished. For months, he drifted through shelters, parks, soup kitchens. He wore shame like a second skin, not just for what his son had done, but for what he hadn't done as a judge, as a man, as a father. But now there was a napkin in his pocket, and a little girl who hadn't known who he was, who hadn't judged his ragged coat or hollow eyes, who had given him her lunch, her only lunch, without hesitation. It cracked something inside him, something he didn't know was still capable of breaking. He rose from the bench, walked, wandered, until he found the school. He didn't know how he'd found it. Maybe it was divine. Maybe it was instinct. But as he stood outside the rusted gate, he saw her, the girl. In a red hoodie 3 sizes too big, sitting on the steps with a banana and a book in her lap. She was humming. He froze. What could he say? How could he explain? She looked up. Their eyes met. She smiled, and it felt like forgiveness. "Hi," he said, his voice hoarse. "Hi," she replied, without fear. He hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't," she said simply. "I remember you." His heart thudded. "You do?" "You were crying," she said. "But you looked like you were trying not to." He couldn't speak. "I do that too," she added softly. "When Mama's sad, I try not to cry, so she doesn't feel worse." He sat down beside her, trembling. "What's your name?" he asked. "Layla." "Layla, of course it was. I'm Nathaniel," he said. "I used to be something else. But now I'm just trying to be better." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. He pulled something from his coat. A wrapped sandwich, peanut butter, crustless with a smiley face drawn in purple ink. He offered it to her. Her eyes widened. You kept the napkin, she whispered. I did, he said. It reminded me of who I forgot I was. She took the sandwich with both hands, then reached into her pocket, pulled out a single crayon, purple. She handed it to him. So you don't forget again, she said. That night, Nathaniel walked back to the shelter with a crayon in his pocket, and a plan beginning to form. He didn't know yet how or when, or even what exactly he'd do, but something had shifted, a purpose rekindled, a name remembered. Lila Vasquez. He would find a way. To repay. To protect. To make right what he had once overlooked. Even if the world said it wasn't his job anymore, because maybe, just maybe, it still was. The sound of children's laughter echoed from the schoolyard behind him, but Nathaniel Gray couldn't smile. Not today. He stood across the street from the school, arms folded, back leaning against the rusted chain-link fence of a shuttered deli. He wasn't watching Lila this time, not exactly. His eyes were locked on the dark sedan parked 2 spots down, black-tinted. Windows. Same one as yesterday. And the day before that. His stomach twisted. Something was wrong. No one noticed. No one ever noticed when something was wrong until it was too late. He crossed the street slowly, ignoring the curious looks from a group of moms gathered at the gate. To them, he was just another homeless man loitering near kids. One of the mothers pulled her daughter closer. He didn't blame her, not after what his son had done. Still, it hurt more than he expected. He stepped up to the gate. The guard, a grizzled man with tired eyes, raised an eyebrow. Back again? Yeah, that your patrol car over there? The man glanced. Nah, not ours. Nathaniel nodded, slow. Been here 3 days. Ever see anyone get out? The jaw clenched. You think someone's watching the kids? I don't know what I think, Nathaniel said. But something stinks. The guard hesitated, then sighed. You want me to report it? Nathaniel shook his head. No, not yet. But if anything happens to the little girl in the red hoodie, you remember this conversation. He walked off. Before the man could answer. By the time school let out, the car was gone. Again. Nathaniel waited on the corner as kids burst through the gates like water breaking a dam. Backpacks bounced, sneakers slapped the pavement, and parents raised hands to wave and scold and hug. Then he saw her. Lila. But this time, she wasn't smiling. She was alone. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Where was her mother? Lila turned left, clutching her backpack tight. Too tight. He followed from a distance, his instincts screaming now. Something had changed in her posture. Her stride was quick, shoulders hunched. She wasn't heading home. She turned down an alley. Lila! He called, unable to stop himself. She spun around. Her face fell when she saw him, not in fear, but in exhaustion. Oh, she breathed. It's you. What are you doing? He asked, trying to sound gentle. She looked down. I was just taking a shortcut. He stepped closer. Where's your mom? Her eyes darted away. He knew that look. I can walk with you, he said. She hesitated, then nodded. They didn't speak until they reached a crumbling apartment block with graffiti across the doors and a broken intercom. This is where you live? Nathaniel asked quietly. She nodded. 3rd floor, 3B. He looked up. A light flickered in the stairwell. Can I walk you up? No, Mama wouldn't like that, she said quickly. She says don't bring strangers upstairs. He nodded, respect flickering in his chest. Smart girl. But still, something was off. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. She said too fast. She turned to go, but then paused. Thank you for the sandwich yesterday. She gave him a ghost of a smile. Then she was gone. Nathaniel stood there for another full minute before turning. As he walked away, a voice stopped him cold. You're not supposed to be here. He turned. The man had stepped out of the black sedan, leaning casually against the hood now. He wore a suit that looked clean but too tight, like he wasn't used to wearing one. Nathaniel's spine stiffened, "And you are?" he asked. "Just someone doing his job." The man smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "You following that girl?" "Excuse me?" "Leila Vasquez," the man said, letting the name hang like a threat. Nathaniel's fists clenched. "Why do you know her name?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step forward. Some people should stay out of things they don't understand. Then he walked past Nathaniel and disappeared around the corner. That night, Nathaniel didn't sleep. He sat in the shelter's common room, flipping through old newspaper archives on the cracked tablet someone had left charging. He typed in everything he could remember: Marisol Vasquez eviction, 3B apartment fire, child services investigation. Nothing came up. Then he remembered something. A case he'd once dismissed without a hearing. Landlord complaints. Unlicensed. Group housing. Police reports. Sealed. He stared at the screen. Pieces were moving. And Leila was in the center. The next morning, he went back. Not to the school. To 3B. He knocked once. No answer. Twice. Nothing. Then he heard it. A faint rustling inside. "Marisol?" He called. "It's Nathaniel. Please, I'm not here to hurt you." Silence, then a slow click. The door opened a crack. Marisol Vasquez's face was thinner than he remembered. Her eyes were sunken, her cheek bruised. She looked terrified. But she recognized him, her breath caught. "You," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "I remember you now." She opened the door wider. And he saw it. The apartment was bare. A mattress, a folding chair. A blanket hung over the window. And a legal notice pinned to the wall. Eviction. Again. Emma Joel was shaking. "He's trying to take her," she whispered. "He says I'm unfit. That I falsified documents. That I owe money I never borrowed." Nathaniel's voice was tight. "Who?" "The landlord," she said. "His name is Jerome Blanche. He's been running this building like a trap. He rents to women with kids, waits for them to fall behind, then threatens to call CPS." Nathaniel closed his eyes. He'd ruled in favor of that man. More than once. He'd believed the paperwork, never saw the people. "I have no one," Marisol whispered. "No lawyer, no one who'll believe me." "You do now," Nathaniel said. She looked up. Broken. Desperate. But still standing. "A mother, a warrior." He pulled out the napkin from his pocket and unfolded it. "She gave this to me," he said, "when I had nothing, no reason to live." Marisol's lips trembled. "I can't promise a miracle," he said. "But I can promise this. I will not let them take her." Her knees buckled, and she dropped into the folding chair. Sobbing quietly. Nathaniel knelt beside her. And this time, when he held someone's hand, it wasn't to pass judgment. It was to carry the weight. Together. He left the apartment with fire in his veins. By nightfall, he was at a legal clinic downtown, digging through case files, cross-referencing addresses, and what he found made his stomach turn. Over 17 eviction cases tied to the same landlord. Each with children. Each with sealed CPS. Reports that followed shortly after. It was a pattern, a quiet war against the voiceless. He printed every document, every signature. Then he made a call. To the last friend he hadn't alienated, a journalist. "Gray? Are you drunk?" "No," he said, "but I'm awake now. And I've got something that'll make your front page burn." The voice on the other end grew quiet. "Start talking." As Nathaniel recited the names, the dates, the betrayals he had once rubber-stamped as law, he felt something shift. Not just guilt, not just redemption, but resolve. Because justice wasn't a title. It was a choice. And this time, he was choosing the right side. Even if it meant exposing his own mistakes. Even if it meant going back into the courtroom, not as a judge, but as a man trying to fix what he broke. The front page hit like a lightning strike. Landlord linked to dozens of illegal evictions. Former judge speaks out. Nathaniel Gray stood across the street from the newspaper stand, hands trembling around a paper cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. The headline was in bold. Below it, a photo of his own face, eyes shadowed, jaw set, stared back at him. Once the man who sat behind the bench. Now the man exposing what he once failed to see. His confession was out. Every ruling he'd made. In those corrupted housing cases, every child separated, every mother displaced. All of it, public now, raw, unedited. Shame turned into evidence, and his name was on fire. The barista from the corner shop passed by, slowed, and gave him a long, unreadable look. She recognized him now. Everyone would. He took a slow sip of the bitter coffee, his stomach turning over like it was lined with barbed wire. He had just painted a target on his own back, and possibly Lila's. By noon, his phone was ringing nonstop. Journalists, lawyers, even a former colleague or two pretending to check in. But it was Marisol's call he was waiting for when it finally came. Her voice was breathless and tight. Someone came to the apartment. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. What? He didn't say anything, just stood outside the door. Knocked once, then slid this under it. She texted a photo, a single slip of paper, doc-typed words. You should have kept quiet. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about money anymore. Someone was scared, and scared people lash out. He checked his watch. I'm coming over. Don't answer the door for anyone. Lila's not home yet, she whispered. She's still at school. I'll get her, he said, already walking. The school was buzzing. A crowd gathered near the gates, parents murmuring and staring at their phones. Word had spread. He spotted the principal by the steps, stiff and pale. Mr. Gray, she said sharply. We need to talk. No time, he said, brushing past her. Where's Lila Vasquez? She's in the library. He was already gone. Inside the library, sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, falling in gentle pools across the reading rugs. And there she was. Lila sat at a corner table, drawing alone. Her small fingers worked quietly with a crayon, but her eyes flicked up the second she saw him. Mr. Nathaniel. She grinned. He crouched beside her, breath catching. Hey, superhero, time to go, okay? Did Mama say so? She did. She slid her picture toward him. Look, I made you this. He glanced down. A drawing of 3 stick figures, a tall one in a suit, a shorter one with long hair, and a tiny one wearing a red HOODIE. Above them, a big yellow sun. Below them, a heart. He nearly lost it. Can I keep this? He whispered. She nodded. It's us. You make Mama smile now. You're like our brave dog. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Come on. Brave dog's got some barking to do. Back at the apartment, Marisol triple-locked the door behind them. Nathaniel stood in the middle of the living room, holding the paper thread in his hand like it might catch fire. This man Blanche, he doesn't want headlines. And he definitely doesn't want lawsuits. What do we do? Marisol asked. We fight harder, he said. Lila tugged his sleeve. What's happening? He knelt down, met her eyes. There are people who try to scare good moms so they can take away their homes. That's not okay. And we're not gonna let them win. She nodded slowly, lips pressed together, like the monsters in stories. He gave a small smile, exactly like that. Then I want to help. His chest tightened. You already are. That night, they didn't sleep. Nathaniel worked through pages of court transcripts on the shelter's borrowed tablet, cross-checking every eviction Blanche had touched. The pattern was now undeniable. A coordinated scheme involving forged notices, under-the-table payments to caseworkers, and falsified complaints. Even some of the judges had looked the other way. He circled one name over and over. Doris Shulman, CPS liaison officer, her signature. Appeared on 8 of the files. 8 families broken up. 8 children. disappeared into the system, and no one had asked questions. Until now. The next day, Nathaniel showed up at the county courthouse. Not as a judge, not as a lawyer, just as a man with a manila folder and fire in his soul. He waited in the lobby for over an hour before Doris appeared, a tall, elegant woman in heels that clicked. Like a metronome, she froze the moment she saw him. "You," she said. "We need to talk," Nathaniel replied. "I don't talk to disgraced judges." He held up the folder. "Then maybe you'll talk to the press." Her eyes flicked to the label. Evidence Blanche Children's Services. She stiffened. "You think you can come back after everything?" She hissed. "You think people want you playing hero now?" "I'm not a hero," he said coldly. "But I'm not looking away anymore." He placed the folder on the table beside her coffee. "This is your chance to stop being part of the rot." She stared at it, then him, then turned and walked away, but she took the folder with her. 3 days passed. No response. My RISOL was spiraling. "I can't do this again," she whispered late one night. "I won't survive if they take her." "They won't," Nathaniel said. "Not this time." She looked at him like she wanted to believe him, but didn't know how. Then came the call. "Doris." Her voice was taut. "I want to meet." "When?" "Now." They met in a parking garage near the government building. Doris looked over her shoulder. 3 times before speaking. "I read your file. And I didn't know the full picture. Blanche has dirt on half the county, judges, inspectors, even my boss." She handed him a flash drive. "Everything I have, emails, deposits, names." He stared at it, breath caught. This could bring the whole system down. "Or get you killed," she said flatly. "Why help?" She looked away. "Because I used to believe in this job, and because one of those kids. She wrote me a letter. Said her mommy cried for her every night." Nathaniel said nothing. He didn't have to. He could feel it in his bones. The world was shifting, and war was coming. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the dim glow of a desk lamp, watching the files load from the flash drive. Photos. Wire transfers. Notes. Names. Dozens of them. People who traded in children's futures like poker chips. And then, near the end, a document labeled Vasquez_Lila_custody_order_draft.docx. He opened it. It was scheduled to be filed in 2 days. They were going to take her, even after the press, even after the public outcry. They were doing it anyway, his hands balled into fists. They were still trying to win, still betting that fear would make everyone else back down. Not this time. Nathaniel stood, shoulders squared. Tomorrow, he was going to war. Not in the shadows. Not with shame. But in court. In public. With every weapon of truth he could wield. Because Lila wasn't just a kid with a red hoodie and a soft heart. She was the reason he got up off the floor, and no one was taking her while he was still breathing. Nathaniel's hands trembled slightly as he stood in line at the courthouse clerk's office. The manila envelope in his hand felt heavier than it should, as if it carried not just paper, but fire inside, a formal counter-motion challenging Lila's impending removal, attached sworn affidavits, timestamps, Doris Shellman's evidence, and a statement from Nathaniel Gray himself. A confession, a condemnation, and a declaration, all bound together. The clerk looked up. "Name?" He cleared his throat. "Nathaniel Gray." The woman paused, brows raised. "The Nathaniel Gray?" He nodded once, her gaze lingered, curious, almost reverent. Then softly, "I hope you win." He handed over the file, because if he didn't win, a child would lose everything. Outside, the morning light fell across the marble steps like a blessing. But Nathaniel knew better. Light could reveal. It could also blind. He pulled out his phone and called Marisol. "It's done." She let out a shaky breath. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the hearing date. It'll be fast. They'll want to bury it before the public catches on." He didn't say the rest out loud. They might try something worse. Lila's voice came faintly in the background. Tell Mr. Nathaniel I made him a bravery card. A smile cracked through the tension in his chest. Tell her I'm going to frame it, he whispered, but his hand wouldn't stop shaking. That afternoon, he met with a small-time journalist named Becca Price. She ran a local column called The People's Court, a justice beat with bite. You've got guts. Judge Gray, she said as she skimmed the documents. Not a judge anymore. That might be exactly why you're dangerous now. He sipped bad diner coffee and watched her expression tighten. This stuff could blow the whole housing department wide open. She said, I'm counting on it. She set down the folder and looked him in the eye. They're gonna come for you know that. They already are. You sure this is just about one little girl? He didn't blink. She's not just anyone. And this isn't just one case. It's every broken system wrapped around her like a noose. Becca nodded. All right then, let's light a fire. 3 hours later, the article went live. System failure. Ex-judge risks it all to save child from corrupt eviction pipeline. Within minutes, it was being shared. Within hours, it was being broadcast. By evening, Nathaniel's name was trending. So was Lila's. Some praised him. Others called him a fraud trying to rewrite his legacy. But the most dangerous reaction wasn't online. It came after dark. He was walking to his car after checking in with a former court clerk when the first blow hit, a hard crack against his ribs, sending him stumbling into the alley wall. Another hit to the back of the head. The world spun. Voices snarled around him. You think people like you get to play hero? A boot slammed into his gut. You don't get to come back from what you did. He coughed blood onto the concrete. You're a dead man walking, Gray. Then, silence. Boots retreating. Tires squealing. He lay there, bleeding, gasping, vision flickering. But one word repeated in his head. Lila. He pushed himself up. Inch by inch. Not yet. Not until she was safe. Marisol nearly collapsed when he arrived at the apartment, shirt torn, limping, blood trailing down his temple. God, what happened? He raised a shaking hand. Don't wake her. She helped him sit, hands fluttering uselessly around his injuries. He gave her the flash drive. Put this somewhere they won't find it. You were attacked, she whispered, horrified. You need a hospital. I need you to stay safe. Her eyes brimmed. I never asked you for any of this. I know, he murmured. That's why it matters. She looked at him like he was both her salvation and her greatest fear. Then, she knelt, gently cleaning the blood from his face, hands trembling. You're bleeding for a kid you met in a hallway. He chuckled weakly. She smiled at me like I was worth saving. The next morning brought more than bruises. A subpoena. Blanche's attorneys filed a motion to discredit Nathaniel as mentally unfit, citing trauma, bias, and inappropriate personal involvement. They were trying to strike him from the record, erase his motion, erase his standing. Erase him. Nathaniel read the notice, heart pounding. This is a preemptive kill shot, he said to Becca over the phone. They're scared of what's coming next, she replied. That's a good sign. He laughed bitterly. Tell that to my ribs. 2 days later, the emergency hearing was called. The courtroom was packed. Camera crews waited outside. Protesters held signs. Stop forced evictions. Lila deserves a home. We see you, Blanche. Inside, Marisol clutched Lila's hand so tight her knuckles turned white. Nathaniel walked in slowly, every step stiff with pain, but his spine was straight, his eyes clear. Blanche sat across from him, slick and smug in a charcoal suit. He didn't even glance Nathaniel's way. The judge, one of Nathaniel's former colleagues, raised an eyebrow. Well, Mr. Gray, we didn't expect you here. Let alone like this. Nathaniel nodded. You didn't expect to need to. A beat. Then he began. With truth, with clarity, with fire. He laid out the pattern, forged documents. Bribed officers, families shattered like glass. He submitted exhibits, testimonies, recordings. He told them about Doris Dot, about the flash drive, about the girl in the red hoodie who lost her home, her toys, her sense of safety, because someone wanted a cleaner building on a real estate listing. He ended with one line: "You have a choice today. You can be the system that buries this, or the one that finally says, enough." Silence. Even Blanche looked rattled. Then Lila stood up. Tiny. Unshaken. Double quotes. "Excuse me," she said softly. The judge blinked. "Little girl, please. I want to say something." She walked to the front, looked right into the judge's eyes. "I like my home. It smells like cinnamon. And Mama sings when she makes pancakes. And Mr. Nathaniel doesn't laugh at my drawings. He put one on the fridge." Her voice cracked slightly. "I just want to stay." Tears slipped down Marisol's cheeks. Nathaniel swallowed a sob. And the judge? He leaned forward and said, "This court is granting a stay of removal pending investigation." The room erupted. Marisol wept. Nathaniel closed his eyes. And Blanche, for the first time, looked afraid. That night, back in the tiny apartment, they ate burnt pancakes and laughed until their sides ached. Lila placed a paper crown on Nathaniel's head. "You're the court king now," she announced. He bowed with mock dignity, and for a moment, just a moment, the scars didn't matter. The war wasn't over, but tonight, they'd won something. Not just a delay, not just a ruling, but belief. Kindness wasn't weakness, that justice could rise from ashes, that one broken man could stand back up and become the reason a little girl felt safe again. And maybe, just maybe, that was what redemption looked like. The knock on the door came just after midnight. Marisol sat frozen on the couch. Leila curled asleep on her lap. A paper crown still perched crookily on the child's head. Nathaniel had dozed off in the armchair, a book balanced on his chest. Glasses askew. The knock came again, softer this time, almost polite. Marisol carefully slid Leila onto the couch and moved toward the door. Heart hammering, she peered through the peephole. A woman stood outside. Mid-40s, sharp suit, expression unreadable. She held no clipboard, no badge. Just a small folder in one hand and an air of controlled power. Marisol opened the door just a crack. "Yes? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Blanche." The air seemed to leave the hallway. "Whatever this is," Marisol began, voice tight. The woman raised a hand. "You want your daughter safe, don't you?" Behind her, Nathaniel stirred. His head shot up. He stood fast, crossing the room with a limp and fire in his eyes. "She doesn't want anything from you," he snapped. "I wasn't talking to you," the woman said coolly. "This isn't your decision." Nathaniel moved to close the door, but Marisol held up a hand. "Wait." The woman took that as invitation and stepped inside. Unbothered by the tension thickening around her like storm clouds, she laid the folder on the kitchen table. "What is this?" Marisol asked, keeping a protective arm slightly extended in front of Lila, who had started to stir on the couch. "A solution." The woman flipped it open. A signed settlement. A full pardon for Nathaniel Gray. A sealed case file for the eviction. A brand new lease for a 3-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, rent-free for 5 years. And at the bottom, a non-disclosure agreement. Marisol's mouth went dry. "You want us to what? Take a bribe? Stay quiet." The woman smiled faintly. "We're offering protection. You're a single mother. You work 2 jobs. You're 1 car breakdown away from another crisis. This isn't a threat. This is mercy." Nathaniel stepped forward, furious. "It's manipulation. It's erasure. You're trying to make her complicit in her own silence." The woman turned to Marisol. "You don't have to keep fighting someone else's battle. Let the city chew itself up. Take the apartment. Put Lila in a better school. Walk away from the fire before it burns you both." Marisol stared at the folder. There it was, everything she had ever wanted to give her. Daughter, stability, safety, space to breathe. And all she had to do was pretend none of this ever happened. After the woman left, the apartment felt smaller, tighter. Nathaniel sat down hard, wincing as his bruises reminded him they still existed. "I'll never judge you," he said finally. "No matter what you choose." Marisol stood, arms folded tight around her. "Don't make this noble. This isn't just about principle anymore. It's about Leila. What kind of mother am I if I say no to giving her a better life? The kind who refuses to let someone rewrite her pain," he said softly. She looked at him, eyes blazing. "You know what I see when I look at that offer? A miracle. You know what I hear when I look at you? A man with nothing to lose." He flinched. She didn't mean it cruelly, but the truth sat between them like a wound. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but this is my daughter, my life, and I don't know if I can gamble it all on hope." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay next to Leila, listening to the soft rise and fall of her breathing. Her tiny hand clutched around a crumpled drawing. A stick figure, Marisol. Another, Leila. And next to them, crooked but smiling, Mr. Nathaniel, underneath. Scrawled in pink crayon, "My family." Tears spilled silently onto the pillow. She thought of the shelter, the cold floors, the way Leila had stopped speaking for days, the weight of failure pressing in like cement. And she thought of now, laughter returning, drawings filling the walls, her daughter sleeping without fear. Was this enough? Or was it built on borrowed time? The next morning, she returned the folder to the woman, but not to accept. "Not yet. I want something else," she said. The woman tilted her head. "I want a guarantee, not just an apartment. I want immunity for him, full immunity. No retaliation, no blacklisting, no gag orders. And I want a formal apology, published, real, signed." The woman's smile vanished. "You're not in a position to negotiate. Then I'm not in a position to sign." The woman's fingers twitched over the folder. "I'll talk to the board," she said finally. "You'll have 24 hours. "When?" Marisol returned to the apartment. Nathaniel was pacing. "You gave them an opening. I gave them a condition. You think they'll play fair?" She met his gaze. "No, but I'm not going to let you get destroyed so I can sleep on nicer sheets." His expression cracked, just a little. "Why?" he asked. "After everything?" she exhaled. "Because my daughter thinks you're part of her family. Because I'm tired of being scared. And because you never once treated me like I was less. Even when I had nothing." He looked away, voice raw. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I'm doing it." The next day, the call came, not from the woman, but from Becca. Her voice was panicked. "They're pulling strings. Nate, they're trying to push a restraining order on you. Bar you from any case involving tenant rights. They want to paint you as a stalker. They're trying to destroy your credibility permanently." Nathaniel's stomach turned. "They're doing it off the books, quiet, fast. And the worst part? They might get away with it unless we hit first." "Hit with what?" Becca hesitated. "There's a name." "A witness?" "No, an insider." A long silence. She's scared. "But if we can get her to talk." He closed his eyes. "Where?" That night, they met in a parking garage 2 cities over. A woman, late 50s, tired eyes, shaking hands, handed Nathaniel a USB drive. "I filed the falsified eviction orders," she whispered. "Not all of them, but enough. I was told they were court authorized. Then one day I looked closer." She paused. "That little girl. The one in the news?" Nathaniel nodded. "She reminded me of my own granddaughter." And just like that, she vanished into the shadows. He drove back, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. Inside that drive, everything they needed to bury, blanch or bury themselves. He handed the drive to Marisol. This could end it. She looked at it, then at him. You sure? No. Then we do it together. He stared at her, stunned. She gave him a small, tired smile. You're not the only one who's tired of being a ghost. Later that night, as rain streaked down the window panes and thunder rolled across the skyline, Marisol sat beside Lila, brushing hair from her forehead. The girl stirred. Mama? Yes, baby? Do we have to move again? She hesitated. No. Not tonight, Lila yawned. Okay, I like it when you sing. Marisol sang, a lullaby from her own childhood, and in the next room, Nathaniel opened the USB drive and stared at the files that could change everything. The storm outside raged on, but in the small apartment, the fire stayed lit. Because sometimes the hardest choices weren't between right and wrong, but between fear and faith. And for the first time in a long time, they chose faith. The storm outside had broken by morning, but inside the small apartment, a different kind of pressure built, quiet, electric, and full of weight. Nathaniel hadn't slept. Neither had Marisol. They sat at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting golden light across their pale faces and the USB drive between them, as still as a ticking bomb. Marisol spoke first, voice cracking. Once we do this, there's no hiding, no going back. There never was, Nathaniel said, rubbing his eyes. The exhaustion buried deep in his bones. The documents inside the drive were worse than either had imagined. Not just Lila's case. Not just forged evictions. There were entire blocks of families displaced, falsified documents, digital signatures, tampered timestamps, all connected to one powerful name, Randall Blanche. Nathaniel had fought corruption before, but this was an empire built on broken homes, and now they were holding its blueprint. Marisol leaned forward, her fingers trembling as they hovered over her phone. We send it to Becca first. She knows the system. She know where it will do the most damage. Nathaniel nodded. They hit send. Less than 12 hours later, the news broke. Not on TV, not in the newspapers. Not yet, but online. A viral post from a small but respected whistleblower blog. The Eviction Empire. Documents leak blows lid off illegal property seizures in Eastbrook. Within minutes, it was being reshared, retweeted. CREENSHOTTD. Then the floodgates opened. People came forward with their stories. Videos, photos, signed affidavits. Old eviction letters they'd always suspected were wrong, but never had proof to challenge. And suddenly, the city began to remember its humanity. Not all at once, but enough. That night, Nathaniel stood at the edge of the rooftop again, where weeks ago he had thought his story might quietly end. The wind was cool, clean. Below him, the city buzzed with something different now. Awareness. Marisol joined him, Lila fast asleep again. Her dreams finally unbroken. It's happening, she whispered. They're talking about it. People are angry. But they're listening. Nathaniel didn't smile. Not yet. Anger burns fast. Justice takes time. Still, she said, the fire's burning in the right direction now. By the next morning, the media had caught up. A segment aired on Channel 9. Then CNN picked it up. Blanche issued a vague, smug statement about anonymous attacks and misinformation. But the pressure was building. Then Becca called. You've got a problem. Nathaniel stiffened. What kind of problem? Blanche knows it was you. He's pushing for an arrest, obstruction, data theft. He's even trying to pin fraud on you. I didn't access anything illegally, he growled. Doesn't matter. If he controls the narrative first, he could destroy your name before the truth gets legs. Marisol had been listening. Her knuckles were white on the edge of the counter. What do we do? Becca took a breath. You go public. What? You put your face out there. Your voice. You show people who you are before Blanche tells them who you aren't. The interview was arranged within hours. A small podcast called City Roots. It didn't have the glamour of prime time, but it had something better. Honesty. Loyal followers. Grassroots momentum. Nathaniel sat across from the host, eyes heavy but unflinching. "Tell us," the host asked, mic crackling. "Why risk everything? Why speak up?" Nathaniel didn't hesitate, because I looked into the eyes of a little girl who thought being evicted was her fault. Because I watched a mother choose between her dignity and her daughter's safety. And because I'm tired of pretending the system isn't rigged. He paused. I didn't do this alone. A brave woman made sure I didn't forget what mattered. And a child reminded me what home really means. He looked directly at the camera. This fight isn't about me. It's about all of us. The clip exploded. In one night, it was viewed over 1 million times. #EvictionEmpire trended on every platform. People began organizing. Protests outside. Blanche's high rise. Demands for resignations. Donations poured in for displaced families. And still, the danger grew. Late that night, a brick smashed through the apartment window. Nathaniel jumped. Marisol screamed. Lila began to cry. A note was tied to the brick. Silence or else. Nathaniel gripped it, jaw clenched. Marisol pulled Lila close, her voice shaking. "We can't stay here." "You're right," he said. "But not because we're scared. Because we're not letting them push us back into hiding." They packed bags. Becca found them a safe house. And even from there, the story kept spreading. Within a week, lawsuits were filed. The district attorney opened an investigation. Randall Blanche issued another statement. This one less smug. Nathaniel. Marisol and Lila were invited to speak at a town hall. They stood together on stage, not as victims, but as catalysts. Mars. O held Lila's hand as she stepped forward. "I am not a lawyer. I am not a politician. I am a mother. I've been ignored, overlooked, and cast aside. But today, I speak because I am done being silent." The room erupted. Lila beamed. And in that moment, the world began to tilt toward change. Outside, after the event, a woman approached them, worn coat, weathered eyes. "You don't know me," she said. "But I was one of them. One of the ones they kicked out. I thought no one cared. But you. You reminded me I matter." She pressed something into Marisol's hand. "A key. It's my old place. I'm moving in with my daughter. I want you and your little girl to have it for now. It's small, but it's safe." Tears sprang to Marisol's eyes. She tried to protest. Woman shook her head. "Let me be the one who helps this time." They moved in the next morning. The apartment was dusty but full of light. There were cracks in the walls, but hope in the air. And that night, as Lila curled into bed, she whispered, "Mama. Are we safe now?" Marisol looked at Nathaniel. He nodded. "We are," Marisol said softly, "because we're not alone anymore." And outside the window, the city that had once turned its back was finally starting to face itself. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like they were winning, together. Rain drizzled against the windows of the small apartment, a soft percussion against the silence that had wrapped itself tightly around the living room. Brenda stood frozen in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the envelope that had just slipped from Mateo's backpack. Her breath hitched. The paper was weathered at the edges, but her name was written in familiar, careful cursive across the front. Mateo, oblivious, was humming to himself in the kitchen, arranging the plastic forks for dinner. Brenda knelt slowly, picking up the envelope with trembling fingers. Her heart pounded. She hadn't seen that handwriting in years, not since before her mother passed. It couldn't be. But it was. She opened it carefully, as if the paper might shatter. Inside was a single sheet, folded neatly, still carrying the scent of lavender. Soap, Her mother's. Mia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've made it back to this apartment. I'm sorry, I never told you everything. I didn't want to weigh you down. I know you carried so much already. But there's something you deserve to know, ... Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. She sank to the floor as the words unfolded a truth she had never imagined. Double quotes ... When you were a baby, someone helped us. A man I never told you about. He wasn't your father, but he saved us. He gave us food when we had none. A place to sleep when we were locked out in winter. I never even knew his last name. But he told me something I never forgot. Someday, when your daughter is old enough, pass it on. Quiet kindness always comes full circle. Brenda's tears fell freely now. The room swam as her mind scrambled through memories of nights her mother came home late, worn and pale, but with a rare softness in her eyes. Of mornings they had enough food when there shouldn't have been. Brenda! Mateo's voice snapped. Her back. She wiped her face quickly, tucking the letter into her pocket. Yeah, baby. Her voice cracked. Dinner's ready. He beamed. I made your favorite, the cheesy rice from the package with the chicken nuggets. She laughed, broken and warm all at once. Chef of the year, she whispered, ruffling his hair. But even as she smiled, her thoughts turned over the letter's words again and again. Quiet kindness always comes full circle. The next morning, Bruce found her in the office kitchen, stirring her coffee with unusual focus. He noticed the way her eyes didn't quite meet his, the tremble in her hand as she poured. Long night? He asked softly. She looked up sharply, too sharply. Do you believe people meet for a reason? She blurted out. Bruce tilted his head, surprised by the question. I do, he said after a beat. I think sometimes we're placed where we need to be, even if we don't understand it yet. Brenda looked at him for a long, searching moment, then nodded. Yeah, she whispered. Me too. Later that day, a challenge neither of them saw coming hit them like a freight train. It was just after noon when the warehouse siren blared a shrill, unnatural sound. Workers paused, heads turned. Elena's voice rang through the hallway. Everyone. Out. We've got a chemical spill in Zone C. Emergency protocols. Panic crackled through the air. Bruce was already moving. Call emergency services. He barked, grabbing a radio. Brenda's heart dropped as her eyes scanned the chaos. Mateo, she cried. Where is he? Elena ran over. I thought he was with Maria. He was, Brenda panted, already running. He went to the break room. His book, he said. He left his comic book. No. Bruce shouted, catching her wrist as she darted toward the danger. Let me go. I'll get him. He's my son. She screamed, wrenching free. He doesn't know. He'll panic. Before he could argue, she was gone, darting through thickening smoke, her breath ragged, every nerve on fire. The break room door was blocked by fallen storage crates. Brenda kicked them aside, coughing hard, the acrid air searing her throat. Mateo! She cried. Baby! A soft sob answered her. She dropped to her knees and crawled under the table. He was curled into a ball, eyes wide with terror, clutching his comic book like a lifeline. It's okay, she whispered, scooping him up. Mama's here. We're going. Smoke poured in. The fire was spreading faster than she'd feared. She tried the hallway, but flames had already claimed it. No. She gasped. She was trapped. Then through the smoke came the unmistakable silhouette of Bruce. Eyes blazing, drenched from a fire extinguisher, mask in hand. Here. He called, tossing the mask. She caught it, fitting it to Mateo's face. Then turned toward the only escape left, a tiny maintenance hatch above the sink. It's too small, she cried. Bruce climbed onto the counter. It's enough, he said. Give him to me. No, Brenda, trust me. She did. She always had. She handed Mateo up. Bruce pulled him through the hatch and set him on the other side before diving back in, but by then, Brenda had collapsed to her knees. Her lungs screamed. Bruce didn't hesitate. He lifted her into his arms, ducked through smoke and ash, and hoisted her toward the light. Outside, chaos raged, flashing lights, shouting EMTs. When they emerged from the haze, Bruce carrying Brenda in his arms, a cheer erupted. They were safe. But something had shifted. Bruce didn't put her down immediately. He held her a moment longer, his forehead against hers, the world blurring behind them. "I told you," he whispered, voice raw. "I'd always be there." That night, after Mateo was safe in bed, Brenda stood in Bruce's office doorway. She held out the letter. He read it slowly, quietly. When he finished, he looked up, stunned. "She was the woman," he said. "The woman who helped me when I was a kid. The one who gave me food from her own table when my dad walked out. The one who smiled like nothing hurt, even when everything did." Brenda nodded, her voice cracking. "That was my mother." Bruce sank into his chair, eyes wide. "All these years, all this time, I never forgot her. And now ... You've been paying it forward," she said, without even knowing. They were silent. Then Bruce reached into his drawer and pulled something out, a thin silver bracelet, engraved with one word, "always." He set it gently on the desk. "I bought it for her," he said, voice thick. "I never got to give it to her. But maybe it was meant for you all along." Brenda picked it up, her fingers brushing the smooth metal. Her breath caught. This wasn't just kindness. This was fate. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and steady, like a lullaby for the city. In a world where so many stories ended in silence, this one had found its way back to light. Through flame, through memory, through a single note tucked behind a clock and a quiet promise made decades ago. And as Bruce and Brenda stood side by side, the past behind them and something unexpected ahead, one truth rang clear: kindness had come full circle, and it had found its home. The sun hadn't even risen when the knock came, not a polite tap, but a sharp, rapid thud-thud that rattled the door on its hinges. Brenda shot up in bed, her heart pounding before her eyes were even fully open. She glanced toward the window gray, light just beginning to press through the curtains. Mateo stirred in his room down the hall, a sleepy murmur escaping his lips. Another knock. Louder this time. Brenda's breath caught. She grabbed her robe, tying it with trembling fingers, and padded toward the door, her feet cold against the hardwood. Her mind raced. Had something happened at the warehouse? Bruce? Elena? Another fire? She opened the door, and everything stopped. Standing there in the hallway was a man in a black coat, soaked with rain, his face shadowed by the low brim of a baseball cap. In his hands was a folder, a thick one, yellowing at the edges. "Brenda." "Alvarez?" he asked, voice low but firm. "Yes?" He reached into his coat slowly. "You might want to sit down." Her instinct screamed. But before she could ask anything else, he held out a photo, old, faded, but unmistakable. Her mother, younger, healthier, smiling. Brenda's knees gave out, and she lowered herself into the nearest chair without a word. "I knew your mother," the man said. "And she knew mine." He stepped inside, uninvited but calm, removing his cap. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the floor. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" He paused, then handed her the file. "My name is Javier Reyes. I've been looking for you for almost 10 years. The room tilted. In the kitchen, the folder lay open on the table like a wound. Inside were pages, letters, forms, bank statements. But what caught Brenda's eye was a photo paper clipped to the top sheet. It was her mother, and beside her a boy. She gasped. That's you." Javier nodded. "She used to babysit me. Feed me when my mom was working doubles at the diner. I was just a street kid. But she treated me like I mattered." His eyes softened. "She used to say, one day, the kids we feed today will build something better than we ever had." I didn't understand then. But now, he leaned forward. When she passed, she left something in her will. Not money, not land, just a promise. She said, "Find my daughter, and help her if you can." She need it. Brenda's throat closed. But why now? After all this time, Javier opened another envelope. Because what your mother never knew is that the man who helped her once was my uncle, a quiet man with a big heart. He passed away last year, left behind something no one expected. He laid out a property deed. He left you this. An old bookstore in the city. It's run down, empty for years. But legally it's yours now. Brenda stared, her mind spiraling. A bookstore? I don't understand, she whispered. Why me? Why now? Because you helped someone else when you had nothing, Javier said simply. That's what my uncle believed in. Paying forward what can never be repaid. Her hands trembled over the papers. A bookstore. A second chance. Out of nowhere. Then, Mateo's footsteps. He appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Mama, who's that? Brenda smiled weakly. Someone from the past, baby. Come say hi. Mateo walked forward shyly. Javier knelt to his level. You like books? He asked. Mateo nodded. A lot, but Mama can't buy them much, Javier grinned. Well, what if I told you? You might have a bookstore now? Mateo's eyes widened. Like our own library? Brenda laughed through her tears. Something like that. Later that day, Brenda and Bruce stood side by side outside the building. The old brick structure loomed before them, worn but dignified. The sign above the door read, Words and Wonders. The door creaked as they stepped inside. Dust danced in the beams of light from the broken windows. Empty shelves lined the walls, but in the quiet there was a kind of magic, something waiting to be discovered. Bruce turned slowly. You really want to do this? Brenda looked around, seeing not decay, but possibility. Yes, she whispered. This isn't just a building, it's a gift. From people who believed in something bigger than themselves. She touched a shelf. I want this to be a place where people feel safe, seen, heard. Bruce's eyes lit up. Then let's build it. But kindness rarely comes without challenge. The next morning, a woman showed up at the bookstore's front steps. Blonde, polished, cold-eyed. I'm Clarissa Monroe, she said, flashing a business card. And you're in violation of city zoning laws. This property has over $18,000 in unpaid fines. Brenda's stomach sank. Fines? We didn't. I suggest you pay within 30 days, Clarissa interrupted, smirking, or the building goes to auction. Then she handed Brenda a bright red notice. Final warning. Clarissa walked away without another word. Bruce stared at the paper in Brenda's hands. This doesn't make sense. None of this showed up in the transfer docs. Brenda gritted her teeth. They don't want to see this place succeed. They want it demolished. Bruce shook his head. Then we fight. This isn't over. For the next week, they worked around the clock. Brenda cleaned, painted, hauled books from donation centers. Mateo sorted children's books by color, reading aloud to every stray cat who wandered in. Bruce handled paperwork, permits, legal letters. The community began to notice. Old women brought cookies. Teenagers offered to help shelve books. A single father donated chairs. A school librarian cried when she saw the children's corner. You don't know what you're doing for this neighborhood, she said, hugging Brenda. This is more than a bookstore, Brenda smiled. It's a beginning. But even beginnings face storms. 3 days before the grand opening, a brick shattered the front window. Brenda screamed. Mateo ducked. Glass flew, spray paint followed. Closer else. The police came. Took notes. Shrugged. Bruce stood silently beside her, his jaw clenched. They want to scare you. Brenda didn't flinch. Then they're going to be very disappointed. That night, she sat with Mateo on the floor of the half-finished bookstore, surrounded by scattered books and broken glass. "Mama," he asked sleepily. Double quotes, "Yes, baby. Why do people try to break things that help others?" She held him tighter. "Because kindness threatens people who build their power on fear." He nodded. "Then we'll be kind harder." She kissed the top of his head. "Exactly." On opening day, the street was packed. Children in handmade costumes, elders with folding chairs, teenagers playing music on cracked speakers. Strangers brought flowers. A line wrapped around the block. Inside, the shelves gleamed. The air smelled like paper, hope, and cinnamon muffins. Brenda stood at the front counter, dressed in her mother's favorite scarf. Bruce beside her. Mateo bouncing with excitement. "This," she whispered, "this is what love built." He reached for her hand. "And nothing will break it again." But just as she cut the ribbon, a limo pulled up to the curb. Clarissa stepped out, flanked by two men in suits. She walked straight to Brenda, lips curled. "You may have won today," she said coolly. "But this isn't over." Brenda didn't blink. "I know," she said calmly, "because kindness is never finished. It just keeps growing, even in the dark." Clarissa's smile faltered. The crowd erupted in cheers. And just like that, what was meant to be a threat became the greatest confirmation of all. They were doing something that mattered. The rain came fast. At one moment, the sky was quiet, still stained with hints of sunlight. And then, without warning, clouds tore open like grief unbottled. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the bookstore's windows. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the front shelves of words and wonders in a ghostly glow. Brenda glanced up from the register as the first customer rushed in, soaked and laughing. "Looks like story weather." He chuckled, shaking his umbrella. She smiled, though her chest felt tight. The past few days had been too perfect. The grand opening, the laughter, the scent of old pages and new hope. Mateo had taken his first paid storytime gig reading to a group of toddlers and narrating with wild voices that made even the shyest laugh. But something about the storm. It felt like a warning, a change. Just as she was wiping the counter, the bell above the door chimed again, and then she saw him. Man stepped inside, drenched from head to toe. He was tall, unshaven, wearing a heavy green coat with a ripped seam near the shoulder. Water dripped from his cuffs onto the floor. His shoes were falling apart. His eyes deep, haunted, bloodshot, fixed directly on Brenda. The world narrowed. She froze. Her breath caught. Mateo's voice floated from the back room. "Mom! Miss, Lisa said I can do the puppet show this week." Brenda blinked, heart thundering, trying to speak. That's great, baby." But her voice cracked. The man stepped closer, and then said, with a rawness that punched through the storm's noise, "Brenda, it's me." Everything stopped. The air, the lights, her thoughts, because she knew that voice, even after all these years, even after the silence, even after what he'd done. "Carlos?" she whispered. Her brother, the ghost she'd buried. She hadn't seen him since the night he left their mother on the floor. Her wrists bruised, his voice slurred, his promises shattered like the dishes he threw. He'd vanished into addiction, jail, shame, and never returned. Not after their mother died. Not after Mateo was born. Not when Brenda had cried herself to sleep on Christmas nights with one spoon in the drawer. And now he was here? She could barely move. I know I should have come sooner." He began, his voice shaky. "I don't expect forgiveness. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, waterlogged notebook. "I wanted to show you this." Brenda didn't take it. COULDN, single quotes D. But he placed it on the counter. "Anyway, I've been sober 5 years," he said softly. "I run a halfway house now, for dads who messed up. Dads who want another chance." He looked around the bookstore. blinking through rain and emotion. I heard about this place. Someone told me it was run by a woman named Brenda Alvarez. And I prayed it was you. I prayed. Brenda swallowed hard, pain and rage and longing battling in her chest. I don't need anything, Carlos added quickly. No money, no place to stay. I wanted you to know. I never forgot what I did. I never stopped wishing I could undo it. The silence between them was almost unbearable, and then Mateo appeared. He looked up at the man. You're crying, the boy said gently. Carlos tried to smile. Yeah, it's a good day. I got to see my sister again. Brenda wanted to scream, run, hug him, collapse. Instead, she whispered, we close at 6. Carlos nodded. No anger. No resistance, I understand. He turned and walked back into the storm. But he left the notebook behind. That night, Brenda sat on the couch, the notebook in her lap. It was a mess, pages swollen from water, ink smeared. But the entries inside made her hands shake. Page after page of confessions. Carlos, writing about the first night he stole money for pills. The first time he saw his reflection and didn't recognize himself. The first time he dreamt of their mother and woke up screaming. But also, the day he got clean. The day he counseled a man who hadn't held his child in 6 years. The day he built bunk beds for homeless fathers. And one entry that destroyed her. I dreamt of Brenda again. She was reading books to a boy with my eyes. I woke up sobbing. I hope she's okay. I hope one day she'll let me stand near the light she made without me. Her tears soaked the pages. The next morning, Bruce noticed her silence. He didn't push, just made coffee, set it beside her, and sat quietly. Finally, Brenda spoke. Carlos came back. Bruce didn't flinch. Your brother? She nodded. He's not the same, but the memory of who he was. Bruce looked out the window. Sometimes the ones who leave the deepest scars are the ones who are bleeding the most. Brenda nodded, voice cracking. I don't know if I can forgive him. You don't have to yet, Bruce said gently. You just have to decide if the door stays locked, or if it opens even a little. 2 days later, Clarissa returned, but this time she wasn't alone. With her was a city official and a new file. This bookstore, Clarissa announced to the stunned customers, has now been flagged for unsafe conditions. Specifically, the roof's foundational support is compromised. Brenda's chest tightened. That's not true. We just had an inspection, a private one. Not city certified, Clarissa snapped. You'll need to evacuate until further notice. Mateo clutched her hand. Mama, what's happening? Brenda looked at Bruce. She could feel it. The weight of their fight. The odds stacked against them, but she wouldn't break. Not now. Not after everything. I want a second inspection, she said. From an independent city representative. And I want it documented, Clarissa sneered. Good luck. She stormed out. That night, while Brenda was sweeping the front steps in silence, a voice startled her. Need help? She turned and saw Carlos holding a ladder. And a toolkit. I'm not just recovering, he said. I'm licensed. I build shelters. I can fix that roof. Brenda stared. Part of her wanted to scream no. To tell him he didn't get to show up now. To pretend the past was patched with shingles. But instead she stepped aside. Then let's see what you've got. For 2 days, Carlos worked beside Bruce, Mateo, and volunteers from the community. They reinforced the beams, repaired leaks, repainted the upstairs classroom where reading circles took place. And slowly, something softened. Brenda watched him, watched the way he treated every stranger with respect, watched how Mateo made him laugh, watched how guilt stayed in his eyes even as hope entered his hands. The day of the second inspection, a new official arrived. He was surprised. The repairs were pristine, better than code. Overdone, even. Who did this work? He asked. Carlos raised a hand. I did. The man paused. You, Reyes? The guy from the shelter project last year? Carlos blinked. Yes, sir. You're a miracle worker, the inspector said. Those dads still talk about you. He signed the form. You're good to go. Cheers erupted, Clarissa watching. From across the street, turned and walked away. Defeated. For now, that night, the bookstore held a late reading session. Carlos stood in the back, near the door, just listening. Brenda called his name. He froze. She held out a chair. Read with us. His eyes widened, then softened. He stepped forward. Sat down. Mateo curled up beside him, and Brenda, voice thick with emotion, began. Once upon a time there was a man who got lost. But then, he found his way. Not because someone rescued him, but because someone still believed there was a way back. Carlos closed his eyes and smiled, for the first time in decades. Rain splattered against the hospital window like a quiet metronome to the chaos inside Bruce's chest. Brenda sat slouched in the waiting room chair across from him, her fingers clenched tightly around the fabric of her worn sweater. Neither had spoken for the past 20 minutes. The silence wasn't awkward, it was loaded, too full to bear. The doctor had said they'd know more soon, but soon never came fast enough when your world hung in limbo. Bruce's hands trembled, slightly, betraying the calm he wore like armor. He kept glancing toward the swinging double doors at the end of the hallway. Mateo was in there. Mateo, who had just wanted to make his mother proud during a school presentation. Mateo, who collapsed in the middle of a sentence while showing his drawing of the strongest woman I know. His breath had caught. His tiny hands had clutched his chest. Brenda's scream had split the air before anyone else moved. I should have noticed, Bruce murmured, voice low, ragged. Brenda's head lifted. Her eyes were rimmed red, but her voice came out clear and strong. It's not your fault. I was the one who said he was doing better. I stopped checking his inhaler bag. I thought, his voice cracked, like a window giving way under pressure. Brenda rose and crossed to him. She knelt in front of Bruce, looking up into eyes dulled by guilt. You care about him. That's what matters. That's why he trusts you. Just then, the doors opened with a soft hiss. A nurse stepped out, clipboard in hand. Mateo is stable, she said with a gentle smile. He's asking for both of you. The flood of relief hit Bruce like a wave, crashing over months of worry and quiet sacrifices. Brenda let out a breath that sounded like prayer. They hurried into the room together. Mateo was lying there, pale but smiling, hooked up to a machine that beeped a reassuring rhythm. Hey, superhero, Bruce said, voice cracking with emotion as he took the boy's hand. You didn't miss my drawing, right? Mateo whispered. Brenda laughed through her tears and kissed her son's forehead. No, baby. We saw every part of it. Mateo's eyes fluttered. Good, 'cause I practiced the whole thing for you and Mr. Bruce. That night, as the rain continued outside, Bruce stepped away for a moment. He needed air, but more than that, he needed answers. The next morning dawned gray and cold, but inside Bruce's apartment, the air was thick with decision. He opened a hidden compartment in his desk, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were the adoption papers, legal files, and the one photograph that haunted him the most. A much younger version of himself, sitting beside a woman in a janitor's uniform, her face hard but kind. His mother. He hadn't spoken about her, not to Brenda, not to Mateo, not even to himself. But after last night, something shifted. Maybe it was the sound of Mateo's voice reminding him of his own. Maybe it was the way Brenda held her son's hand like the world could end and she'd still shield him. Or maybe it was guilt, the kind that gnawed away at your bones until you either told the truth or drowned in silence. He picked up the phone. Elena? I need to schedule a company-wide meeting. Yes, today. No postponements. The warehouse buzzed with tension that afternoon. It wasn't often that Bruce Rivera called an all-hands meeting. Employees stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering theories, layoffs, restructuring. A sale? Brenda stood off to the side with Mateo, who now carried his inhaler like a badge of honor. Bruce stepped onto the makeshift stage, a piece of paper trembling slightly in his hand. "I know this is unexpected," he began, his voice carrying through the metal rafters. "But some truths wait too long to be spoken." He paused, met Brenda's gaze, then turned back to the room. "I was raised by a single mother who scrubbed hotel toilets while I slept in supply closets. I grew up invisible until one day someone chose to see me. That person gave my mother a chance, and in doing so, gave me one too. Her kindness saved us. Her strength shaped me." Murmurs rippled across the crowd, and years later, he continued, when I met Brenda Lopez and her son Mateo, I recognized the same fight in her eyes, the same hope, the same exhaustion. I remembered what it felt like to watch your parent carry the weight of the world alone. Brenda's eyes welled. Mateo clung tighter to her side. "I'm not telling you this for applause. I'm telling you because our company is built on more than clean floors and balance sheets. It's built on people, on stories, on second chances." He looked straight at Brenda. "Which is why, effective immediately, Brenda will be leading our new family support initiative. We'll provide after-school care, emergency health aid, and meals for employee families." There was a stunned silence, and then applause. Raw and rising, like thunder rolling through the steel building. Mateo stared up at Bruce, wide-eyed. "You're not just a boss," he said quietly. "You're a good guy in disguise." Bruce chuckled. "Takes one to know one, kid." Later that night, Brenda found Bruce back on the rooftop. It had become their quiet place, a spot above the noise, where truth could breathe. She walked up and handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "Mateo's new drawing," she said. "He wanted you to have it." He opened it slowly. It showed a tall man standing beside a woman and a boy. No masks, no capes. Just three people holding hands beneath a banner that read, "Real heroes show up." Bruce's throat tightened. He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. "I meant what I said, Brenda. This isn't just about a job. It never was." Brenda stepped closer. "I know. And I never thanked you for what you did for my son. For me." "You did," he said, voice low. "Every time you showed up." The city lights flickered below them, blinking like stars trying to find their way home. They stood there, two people once broken by the world, now slowly stitching something new between them, not perfect, but real. The courthouse steps were unusually quiet that morning. Not for lack of people. Hundreds had gathered, holding signs, candles, and worn-out hopes. But it was the kind of quiet charged with breathless anticipation. The kind that settles just before a verdict changes the course of a city. Mary Saul stood among them, Lila's hand nestled tightly in her own. The little girl wore her best dress, a soft yellow one with white daisies stitched at the hem. Nathaniel stood on Mary Saul's other side, his eyes locked on the courthouse doors like they held back a dam. Inside, the jury was deliberating. Months had passed since the first document leaked, since the brick shattered their window, since that trembling woman had handed over the key to a second chance. Months of interviews, lawsuits, threats. Months of organizing shelters, community meetings, and support centers. And now it all came. Down to this day, to this hour, to this verdict. Mariso, Elle exhaled slowly, brushing a thumb across Lila's cheek. "You cold, baby?" Lila shook her head, just scared. Nathaniel knelt to her level. "Hey," he whispered, "remember what you told me that day after your school assembly?" Lila tilted her head. "You said, even the smallest person can make a big story." Her smile was slow but sure. "I did say that." He nodded. "And here we are. Your story helped change everything." Inside the courtroom, the jury filed back in. 12 faces unreadable. Judge Branson's gavel struck once, cutting through the tension like a lightning bolt. In the case of the People versus Randall Blanche, the foreperson began on the charge of criminal conspiracy to defraud low-income families. We find the defendant guilty. A sound erupted in the room, not a cheer, not a scream, something deeper. A collective exhale, tears, hushed sobs, hope crawling out of old wounds. Lila clapped without fully understanding why. Marisol just held her close, trembling as if she'd been holding her breath for years, and finally remembered how to breathe again. Blanche didn't look up. For once, the man who'd towered over others from behind dark suits and smirks seemed small, deflated. His empire had collapsed under the weight of truth, carried on the backs of the very people he once thought invisible. Outside, the media swarmed, flashbulbs, questions, shouting, but Marisol kept her head high as she walked down those courthouse steps. When a reporter asked, "Do you feel justice was served?" she paused. "Yes," she said, "but justice doesn't mean revenge. It means repair, and this is just the beginning." Nathaniel added, "The city forgot its heart. We're here to make sure it never forgets again." Weeks later, the mayor issued a formal apology. A reparations fund was established, backed by seized assets from Blanche and his associates. Families began returning to neighborhoods that had once been hollowed out. Doors reopened. Windows lit up again. Nathaniel was asked to join the Advisory Council for Housing Reform. He said yes, but only if Becca could co-chair.marisol was offered a permanent leadership position at a nonprofit supporting displaced families. Her first act? Hiring 3 women who had lived in shelters during Blanche's reign. And Lila? She was asked to speak at her school assembly again. This time, she walked on stage with a different drawing in hand, one of her mothers standing in front of a crowd, holding up a lantern that read, "Truth." One evening, the new community center held an open house. The building buzzed with laughter, music, and the smell of home-cooked food. Nathaniel found Marisol near the snack table, helping kids cut paper stars for a kindness wall. "I got something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "If it's another USB drive, I'm running." He grinned and held up a simple key. A brass one, old, but polished. She looked at it, confused. "It's for the bookstore." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" Nathaniel nodded. The building was foreclosed after Blanche's fall. Becca pulled some strings. "I bought it back. But I figured it should have your name above the door." She blinked, tears threatening. "Nathaniel ... That place was your dream." He looked at her then, really looked. Dreams change. Sometimes they get better. Marisol didn't reply. She just leaned in, wrapped her arms around him, and held on. Later that night, as the stars scattered like salt across the sky, the 3 of them sat on the bookstore floor, surrounded by boxes of unsorted books, loose paperbacks, and 1,000 what-ifs. Lila was curled up in a beanbag, snoring softly, clutching a stuffed owl someone had given her at the event. Nathaniel leaned back against a shelf. "Think she'll remember all this?" Marisol brushed hair from Lila's forehead. "She might not remember every headline, but she'll remember how it felt, being safe, being heard." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was whole. Then Marisol reached into her coat and pulled out the note that had once been tied to a brick. "Silence or else." She handed it to Nathaniel. "I kept it, not because I was afraid, but because it reminds me how far we've come." He read it, then slowly tore it in half. Then again. And again, when only confetti remained. They let the pieces fall to the floor. Months passed. The city did not heal overnight. But small things started to change. Property laws were revised. Shelter programs expanded. And a mural appeared on the wall of a school playground. A woman with a lantern and a child by her side. standing before a skyline of rising homes. No names, no slogans, just an inscription. Built by truth, lit by courage. Years later, on a warm spring morning, Leela stood at the front of a packed auditorium. She was older now, confident, clear-eyed and strong. Her speech was part of a Youth Leadership Award ceremony. But as she spoke, her voice never wavered. I was once a little girl who thought it was her fault we had no home. I thought being invisible kept us safe. But then someone saw us, and more importantly, they let us see ourselves. She looked out over the crowd, locking eyes with her mother. And Nathaniel in the front row. Kindness isn't weakness, she said. It's the spark that burns down injustice. Applause filled the room. Marisol's eyes filled with tears, and Nathaniel reached over, took her hand in his, and whispered, "We did okay, didn't we?" She smiled, full and bright. We did more than okay. We reminded the world what love looks like when it refuses to stay quiet.